Welcome. Thank you so much for tuning in. My name is Hannah Fernandez, and you're watching SCORE TV. SCORE is a nonprofit organization dedicated to helping small businesses across the United States get off the ground, grow, and achieve their goals through education and mentorship. So whether you are a new entrepreneur or you've been in business for a long time, our SCORE mentors could offer you free business mentoring and other resources for the life of your business. To connect with us, check out our website at chicago.score.org. You could email us at info@scorechicago.org, or you could also call us at 312-353-7724. Today we're going to talk about the benefits of social good in business. With me is Dawn Epting, who is the Vice Chair of Partnerships at SCORE Chicago. Dawn is also the President and CEO of Nonprofit Development Center. Dawn, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me, Hannah.
It's a pleasure. And Dawn, in today's climate, many entrepreneurs are incorporating social good into their business models. So can you elaborate what social good is for us?
So social good really is an activity that benefits the largest number of people in the largest way. It involves initiatives such as clean air, clean water, health care, literacy, and the overall objective is to create a benefit for society. And that is accomplished through charitable or philanthropic means.
Yes. And Dawn, what is your professional background and how did that lead you to become a business advisor and also to start your nonprofit, the Nonprofit Development Corporation, or NPDC?
So I was a financial analyst in the Air Force for 6 years. After that, I obtained my MBA. I became an investment advisor. I was hired by Morgan Stanley and Edward Jones, but I really wanted to focus on entrepreneurship.
Yes.
So I worked with the Small Business Development Center for a while and noticed that there were not a lot of nonprofit organizations that were able to be assisted through the Small Business Development Center. So I founded a nonprofit called Christian Suicide Prevention, and we took calls from all over the United States and Canada on a crisis line. And I really realized that there was no standardized method or business practice for nonprofits as I started my own nonprofit. So I really wanted to focus on not just business advising, but helping companies that were engaged in social impact and social good. And I do that also through the faith-based and inspirational speaking that I do. So it kind of developed because people would come in and ask questions about their nonprofit, but there was really no general guide or standardized process for nonprofits.
So you saw the need and you're filling that gap right now.
Absolutely.
Gotcha. And so, most customers and clients today, they want to do business with companies, right, that reflect their personal values. So how does your company engage in social good?
So we engage in social good primarily through working with nonprofit corporations and B corporations. B corporations are for-profit organizations or entities that are engaged in social good. They're required to go through an assessment through what is called B Lab, which is a nonprofit organization. And B Lab evaluates the quality of a company's products and services, how a company treats its workers in the environment, and what benefit the business is providing to the community. So the Nonprofit Development Center is really working with nonprofits and B corporations that both seek to make a social impact.
It sounds like a complicated process. So your whole goal is to go ahead and walk your clients through every single step of the way? Is that correct?
So absolutely. So through the setup of the nonprofit or corporation, through the strategic plan, through measuring outcomes and impact in terms of their social objectives. So from start to finish, it can be very complicated, but it's very rewarding.
I can tell you love it. And so, what is corporate social responsibility, and how is that applicable to socially good business practices?
So CSR, corporate social responsibility, are business practices that involve initiatives that benefit society. When most people think of CSR or corporate social responsibility, they think of initiatives such as a company giving away a proceed of its money to charities. But CSR really involves four areas that are most common, which are environmental causes.
Okay.
So a lot of companies, especially bigger companies, have a big carbon footprint, and it's important to reduce that carbon footprint. So it involves environmental, ethical labor practices, which are really important, especially when you're talking about companies that are developing or that will be serving internationally in terms of employment laws. I mean, we've all heard of factories and some of the substandard conditions in
Yes.
factories. So environmental, ethical labor practices, volunteering. Companies it's important for their, employees to volunteer for nonprofits and other charitable organizations, and philanthropy, that's the big one. And philanthropy is not just giving away financial resources. It can be expertise, it can
Right.
be in-kind donations. So philanthropy is what most people think of when they think of corporate social responsibility.
Gotcha. And as you mentioned, many companies are putting a lot more resources into philanthropic causes. So, what do you believe is the biggest benefit of social good? And why is it important in business? I mean, why should our viewers pay attention?
Okay, so I think one of the biggest benefits of social good is that it really seeks to provide a service in terms of solving social problems in a sustainable way, in terms of human capital and not necessarily monetary capital. So I think that is one of the biggest benefits. And I think it's important because in a recent Aflac survey,
Okay.
81% of consumers said that they're more likely to patronize a company that is engaged in philanthropy or some type of social good. So it's not just a cute, phrase. It's important for not only the business, but in order to retain and increase its consumer base.
Exactly. So it's also practical for businesses because it does impact your bottom line. Because just like you said, if I'm going down and grocery shopping, if I know that this salad dressing, if part of the profits are going to a good cause, I'm more than likely to go ahead and grab that product as well.
Right, exactly. Exactly.
So you're absolutely right about that. Now, as we've talked about, today's consumer is socially conscious. Millennials in particular are drawn to brands that are committed to social good. So as a result, what changes in the workplace do you envision over the next decade?
So with millennials in that same Aflac survey that I referenced just now previously, 82% of millennials are now seeking employment in companies that are engaged in philanthropy or social good. In terms of, it's really important in terms of the social consciousness of it, and they're drawn to that brand. So we have companies, I referenced a few companies here. Warby Parker is a company, and they're engaged in CSR, and they're employing more millennials. They produce eyeglasses, and a portion of the eyeglasses that they produce, they give to nonprofit organizations. And then there is Greyston Bakery. It's based in New York. They're also engaged in CSR. In terms of ethical labor practices, they employ a lot of ex-offenders. And then you have companies such as Sanergy, which is based out of Kenya, in Africa. And what they do is they've tried to implement a solution to the dense urban sanitation problem in the area. And they actually make latrines, and they convert the waste into organic fertilizer.
Oh, wow.
So all of these companies are engaged in social good, and millennials are increasingly drawn to these types of companies.
And that would really bring a sense of pride if you work for those type of organizations, as well as boost some employee morale, don't you think?
Oh, yeah. I think that, one of the reasons why people got involved with my nonprofit, Christian Suicide Prevention, on the hotline is because they felt like they were plugging into a vision and a purpose bigger than themselves. So I think that people want to make money, they want to draw a salary, but at the end of the day, they want to feel like they're a part of a company that is making a difference in the world. They want that inner fulfillment.
Absolutely. So Don, how can companies leverage their ability for social good through partnerships?
I want to go back, I'm sorry, I didn't answer all of your questions,
Sure.
the previous question. So in the next 10 years in particular, what I envision is things such as, or I would hope, with financial statements in terms of the business plan, hopefully things like social assets will be on the balance sheet. And on the income statement, we have net income. Net impact is something that I would like to see over the next 10 years. And also, something I would envision is that a requirement for starting any business would be a measurement or some type of statement in the mission statement in the articles of incorporation or articles of organization for an LLC.
Yes.
Involving social impact. What type of social impact do you seek to make?
Gotcha. So you said you'd like to see social impact type metrics in financials. Are you seeing any of it at all? You said you'd like to see it in the next 10 years, but what about now?
Not so much. It's
Okay.
still a very evolving concept. I think that there is an emphasis on it now, so people are becoming a lot more aware of it now.
Okay. And let's backtrack a little bit. So what is social impact? Really let's dig into that. And how does it relate to social good in business?
So social impact is somewhat of a derivative of social good. It's more at a micro level, whereas social good is a general benefit to society. Social impact has more to do with the well-being of a community.
Okay.
So measuring outcomes and impacts in particular communities. And we see organizations such as Habitat for Humanity that measures and, goes in, builds homes, and measures impacts in terms of social good.
Okay. And how is that specifically measured? Can you give some examples? for us?
So it's very, like I said, it's evolving still.
Okay.
And generally, there are what are called logic models that are used to measure social good.
Yeah.
And so you have inputs, you have outputs, you have outcomes, and you have impacts in most logic models. So the inputs would be the resources that you put into a particular organization or project. Your outputs would be the work that you produce in order to achieve your end, your social end.
Yes.
Your outcomes would really just be what changes were produced. And the impact would be the greater impact that is seen in the community. So with any social measurement, impact measurement, one of the things you want to look at is what problem are you solving in any business?
Right.
What is the solution to the problem? What will you invest to solve that problem? What steps will you take? Measuring the impact, and you have to determine how you will measure the impact. And once you have measured the impact, how can you create a bigger impact? So for some people, it may be something like, acres conserved, ex-offenders employed, like in the case of Greystone Bakery that I talked about earlier. Greystone Bakery in Yonkers, that makes brownies and different things for Ben and Jerry's ice cream. Or, reduced rates of recidivism, when you're talking about ex-offenders. So each company currently is measuring their impact. unless they're a B corporation and they're going through the B Lab assessment, which is actually helping companies to measure impact as well.
Got it. Even for SCORE Chicago, I mean, we measure our impacts. I mean, in terms of number of jobs created and in terms of number of new businesses started in the local area in Chicago as well as across the country nationwide.
Right.
So.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's important. How do you justify donations if you're a nonprofit, grants, partnerships, or consumers to continue to, patronize your business if you are not providing those metrics?
Exactly. And in creating this impact, I know that having the right alliances is really important. So how can companies leverage their ability for social good through these partnerships?
I think that the way that they can leverage them is, simply by collaborating. Often it's very segmented.
Okay.
In the state of Illinois alone, you have 37,000 nonprofit organizations according to the Illinois Attorney General's database. So often these are human service nonprofits. So you have a lot of nonprofits that help youth or assist the elderly or assist the homeless. And if these nonprofits could collaborate, of course you can leverage your resources, your volunteer base. I actually had a couple of clients in my office today. One started 2 nonprofits in Africa. Well, I started them for him.
Great job.
And another already had a nonprofit in Nigeria in particular, but I was helping him with his for-profit, with the business planning. So I said, well, how can we, since you both are doing work particularly targeting Nigeria throughout sub-Saharan Africa, how can we leverage these resources? You're both working for youth and trying to target youth through educational opportunities, scholarships, and an increased awareness of entrepreneurship. So really, it's really just not being so segmented and focused on our own goals and objectives, but focused on the goals and objectives of the community at large, and really plugging into those collective visions.
Exactly. And even for a nonprofit like SCORE Chicago, we, reach out to a lot of our partners. We had the meeting a couple weeks ago with a lot of the stakeholders under one roof, because for small business owners out here, not just in Chicago but across the country, there's so many resources that they may not even know about.
Absolutely.
And so in bringing in, the city of Chicago and bringing in Illinois SBDC, Greater Southwest Development Corporation, and SCORE Chicago, Women's Business Development Center, and a lot of our other strategic alliances, this is where we could go ahead and work together instead of working separately under different silos. And that's really powerful.
And the benefit also is where one organization may not be as strong, they can say, well, hey, SCORE Chicago does what you're looking for, or we can refer someone. We're not necessarily, the best in this area, but we can send you, to the Women's Business Development Center.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Now, what is the difference between integrating social good in business versus starting a nonprofit organization? Because I know that some viewers may be wondering, what is the difference?
So with a nonprofit organization, often the model up into this time, and it's beginning to change, but the model is really based on the benevolence of others. So it's based on charitable donations, whereas, social good in business, especially particularly in social enterprise structures, revenue generation through sound and quality products and services helps to sustain the organization, whether it's a nonprofit or for-profit. So with a nonprofit, often you're relying on the benevolence and altruism of others, but you're able to be, a lot more proactive, with social good business models and creating revenues and employment opportunities for the community, etc.
Gotcha. Thanks for explaining the difference. And in a study by Nielsen, 55% of global online consumers across, and this is 60 countries, say that they're willing to pay more for products and services from companies that are committed to positive social and environmental impacts. So in response, you see a lot of companies altering their businesses to go ahead and meet those demands and also desires of those consumers, correct? So what are some ways that social good shows up in business practices or current business models?
So it shows up primarily in a few ways.
Okay.
So you have CSR, as we talked about earlier, and that really involves for-profit companies and the philanthropic activities that they engage in to nonprofits or to the community at large. And then you have social entrepreneurship, and these are companies that they are profitable and their desire is to turn a profit, but they're solving a social problem. It's not necessarily a product, a solution in terms of introducing a product for profit, but they're solving some type of social issue. That's the whole reason that they're in business. And then you have a model which is social enterprise. And as I alluded to earlier, social enterprise is really involves the generation of revenue by the corporation to sustain itself. So they're not relying as heavily on donations or grants, but they're relying on their own revenue. And we see this in companies such as Streetwise, with the selling of newspapers here in the Chicagoland area by the homeless to generate revenue to sustain the corporation. We see it. Goodwill is a very it's been around for a long time. So we see that in that non-for-profit social enterprise model. So those are a few of the business models in terms of social good and business practices that involve social good.
And just out of curiosity, how did you run across SCORE, and what sparked you to go ahead and become a SCORE mentor and volunteer?
I came across SCORE when I moved back here in 2008, and I was familiar with SCORE. And anything that involves entrepreneurship, as you know, you have your own company.
Yes.
Often there is not a blueprint,
Right.
when you're an entrepreneur. So it's always great to be plugged into those resources and people that are willing to help you navigate that path, and people that can understand some of the challenges involved with entrepreneurship. So I really wanted to get involved in, with my company, we do business seminars. So SCORE does a lot of seminars as well. So that was something that I wanted to support as well for small businesses.
And your mission is, truly aligned with SCORE. So now having the vision to become a social entrepreneur is great, but making it happen is another story. So Dawn, what advice would you give entrepreneurs who would like to transform their brand with social good and still be profitable?
Solve a problem.
Oh, there you go.
That's the big thing. I mean, in business, I also teach business seminars. I was contracted at one of the Chicago public high schools. And in any business, whether you're a nonprofit or a for-profit, in order to be profitable in terms of revenue generation with either a for-profit or nonprofit business model, you have to identify a problem and be able to solve it. It's not enough to say, well, I like this, it sounds like a good business idea. Will you solve a problem? Is there a market for it?
That is perfect. Well, Dawn, thank you so much for being here today and for all the work that you do for SCORE in our community.
Thank you so much, and thank you for the work that you do. I appreciate it.
Of course, and it's my pleasure. And to those of you that are watching, if you're a business owner and you'd like to become a SCORE mentor, we would love for you to connect with us. Our website is chicago.score.org. Let me go ahead and pull that up, chicago.score.org. You could also email us at info@scorechicago.org, or you could call us at 312-353-7724. Thank you so much for watching. My name is Hannah Fernandez, and we'll see you again next time on SCORE TV.